My name is Chloe. I'm 32 years old, and I was sitting in a sterile wood-paneled office when my world fell apart. The lawyer cleared his throat reading my dad's will. When he got to the main inheritance, the words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My father, Robert, a man of 68, had left his entire $10 million estate to a man I'd never heard of. My heart pounded in my ears. But when the lawyer pointed to the man in question, I felt the floor drop out from under me. My dad was a fortress. He was kind, provided everything I ever needed, but he was emotionally distant. He built a successful tech company from the ground up, and his office was his kingdom. I grew up thinking his work was his only real passion. We weren't estranged, but there was always a pane of glass between us I could never quite break through. He passed away suddenly from a heart attack, leaving a void I didn't know how to process. The funeral was a blur of faces I barely knew, business partners, old colleagues. I just wanted it to be over. I thought the will reading would be a simple formality, the final piece of paperwork in a nightmare week. I was his only child. Of course, everything would come to me. I had plans to use the money to expand animal shelter I managed, a cause he always politely supported but never invested in. To Samuel Miller, the lawyer read, his voice monotone, I bequeath my entire remaining estate. I blinked, the name echoing in the silent room. I'm sorry, who? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The lawyer, a man of about 60 named Mr. Gable, looked at me with something like pity. He gestured to a quiet man sitting in the corner, a man I hadn't even noticed. Mr. Samuel Miller, your father's building janitor. A hot wave of humiliation and rage washed over me. The janitor? The man who emptied the trash cans and mopped the floors? All those years of feeling like I was on the outside looking in, and this was the punchline? My father had chosen a complete stranger over his own daughter. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was this a mistake? A cruel joke? Was he being blackmailed? I left the office without a word, my legs moving on autopilot. The first person I called was my best friend Jessica, who was also 32. I told her everything, my voice breaking over the phone. A janitor, Chloe? That's impossible, she said, her tone sharp with disbelief. You have to contest this. This man clearly took advantage of your father. We need to hire a private investigator right now. Her words fueled my anger. She was right. I couldn't let this happen. The next day, I drove to my father's office building, determined to confront this man, Samuel. I found him in the lobby, polishing the brass plaque by the entrance. He was a man who looked to be about 65, with tired eyes and hands worn from years of hard work. He didn't look like a scheming millionaire. He looked sad. When he saw me, he put down his cloth. Miss Thompson, he said, his voice soft, I was hoping I'd get a chance to speak with you. There was no gloating in his eyes, no triumph, just a deep, profound sorrow. I know this is a shock, he continued, and you have every right to be angry. But your father was a great man. There are things you don't know. His calmness infuriated me even more. Things I don't know? I snapped. I know that my father gave his life's work to a stranger instead of his own family. What else is there to know? He just shook his head slowly, a pained look on his face. This was never about the money for me, he said quietly. It was his way of finishing something. Please, can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I'll explain everything. Against my better judgment and against Jessica's frantic warnings, I agreed. I needed answers more than I needed to be right. We met at a small diner the next morning. The air between us was thick with tension. I sat there, arms crossed, ready for a fight, ready for some rehearsed story designed to win my sympathy. I was ready for anything except what happened next. Samuel didn't speak for a long time. He just stirred his coffee, his gaze distant. Finally, he reached into the pocket of his worn jacket and pulled out an old, tattered leather wallet. His hands trembled as he fumbled with it, eventually pulling out a small, faded photograph, the corners soft with age. He slid it across the sticky tabletop toward me.
"This is where it started," he said, his voice cracking. My hand shook as I picked it up, my world about to be turned upside down for the second time in a week. The photograph showed two young men, probably in their early 20s, standing in front of a garage. They were grinning, arms slung around each other's shoulders, covered in grease but beaming with pride. One of them was unmistakably my father, looking younger and happier than I had ever seen him. The other was a young Samuel Miller. We started the company together, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. It was just the two of us in my parents' garage. We called it RS Solutions, Robert and Sam. We poured every dime we had, every waking hour into that dream. My mind struggled to connect this image of youthful ambition with the silent, distant man who raised me. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the photo. He continued, his gaze fixed on a past I never knew existed. We were on the verge of our first big contract when we made a mistake, a coding error. It caused a huge data loss for a potential client. They threatened to sue us into oblivion. We would have lost everything before we even began. He took a deep breath, the memory still raw. We couldn't afford a lawyer. One of us had to take the blame. Your father had you, Samuel said, looking me straight in the eye for the first time. You were just a baby. He had a family to protect. I had no one. So I told the client it was all my fault. I signed a document taking full responsibility. The lawsuit was dropped, but my name was ruined. I was blacklisted in the industry. The weight of his words crushed the air out of my lungs. Your father never forgot, he whispered. He tried to give me money for years, but I was too proud. I couldn't take a handout. But I lost my apartment, everything. Years later, he found me working 3 jobs just to get by. He offered me the janitor position in his new building. He said it was the only way he could keep an eye on me, make sure I was okay. It was his daily penance. My anger had evaporated, replaced by a profound, aching sadness. The pane of glass between my father and me, it wasn't indifference. It was guilt. It was the weight of a secret he carried for over 30 years. He wasn't a fortress. He was a man living in a prison of his own making. And the janitor I'd scorned was the keeper of the key. I left the diner in a daze, apologizing to Samuel without really knowing what to say. When I got home, I called Jessica. I told her the whole story. She was silent for a long time. "Oh, Chloe," she finally said, her voice soft. "I'm so sorry. I was completely wrong." Her words were a small comfort, but my mind was elsewhere. I needed proof. Not because I didn't believe Samuel, but because I needed to hear it from my father. I went to his home office, a place I'd rarely entered. I started going through his old filing cabinets, my hands dusty from years of untouched history. In the very back of a drawer, under a stack of old tax returns, I found a small, locked metal box. I knew his birthday was the combination. With trembling fingers, I dialed the numbers. It clicked open. Inside, there was a single yellowed envelope with my name written on it in his familiar, sharp handwriting. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. It was a letter. "My dearest Chloe," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've learned my greatest failure and my deepest secret. Samuel Miller is the best man I have ever known. The company, the money, all of it, it was built on his sacrifice." The letter went on to explain everything Samuel had told me, and more. He wrote of his shame, his regret, and his unending loyalty to his friend. "I could never bring myself to tell you," he wrote. "I didn't want you to see me as the flawed man I was. Leaving him this inheritance isn't charity, it's a debt being paid. It is justice, long overdue. Please do not fight this. Honor the man who gave you the life I was able to provide." Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the brittle paper. For the first time, I felt like I truly knew my father, not the stoic businessman, but the young man in the garage, full of dreams and a terrible burden. The next day, I went back to Mr. Gable's office, this time with Samuel by my side. I told the lawyer I would not be contesting the will. In fact, I wanted to help execute it. Samuel was uncomfortable with the money. "This is too much, Chloe," he insisted. "It was never about this." I looked at him, this kind, humble man who had lost everything for my family. I know, I said, which is why we're not just going to accept it, we're going to use it. We decided to split it. With his half, Samuel started a foundation to provide legal aid and second chances to young entrepreneurs who make mistakes so no one would have to go through what he did. With my half, I didn't just expand the animal shelter, I built a new state-of-the-art facility and named it the Robert and Samuel Friendship Center. It was a tribute to a bond that had silently shaped my entire life. I learned that the greatest legacies aren't written in wills, but in the quiet acts of loyalty and love that we carry in our hearts.
My father didn't leave me money. He left me something far more valuable, the truth. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed the way you saw someone you loved? Until the next story.